Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmer Chabad Center, and we have a very special guest with us. Our co-host first is Mark Ronich, a statewide news service at jbiztechvalley.com.
Yep.
And our very special guest is Mr. Stephen Heider. Should I call you Chief? Because you're the Colonie Police Chief and also the President of New York State Police Chiefs. Can I call you?
You can call me Steve, you can call me Chief.
Chief, all right.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Steve. I've known you for almost 20 years, and I just really,
I hope you're on the right side of
yes,
the law,
the
Mark.
right side of the law.
We were just talking about that. It's always been on the right side.
Yeah, all right, there you go.
And I just, and you've gone up through the ranks to become police chief. You were an officer.
I actually started as a dispatcher in
Dispatcher.
communications and became an officer shortly thereafter and rose through the ranks.
Wow. So that gives a lot of respect from your officers. You have 109 police officers.
We do. We also have another 51 civilians. So total, we've got 160 people that work at the police department. We manage a very busy 911 center. So we have a civilian dispatch group there. And that's what I started in I hate to say this, in 1973. That's when I started as one of the first 5 dispatchers in the police department's history.
Wow.
Just compare and contrast, I mean, because I have an interesting question I'm leading up to, like the crime, and let's compare the other 2 suburbs, Guilderland and Bethlehem. But see, it's really not comparison because we've had already the Colonie, the president of the Colonie.
No, the Bethlehem police
Well,
chief.
we had police chief, but also Colonie says that you have triple the population of Bethlehem, so numbers are probably a little skewed. And I guess that leads up to my question. We also had the Albany Police Department here, and we figured out that the population is fairly the same, about 100,000 or 80, 90, 100,000, and they have over 300 officers compared to your 100.
Why are you so more efficient, and why do you have so few officers?
I won't say that in defense of Chief Krokoff, but the capital city is a different animal from the suburbs around it.
Why is that?
Well, when you look at it, the demographics are different, the economy scale is different. They have a much more diverse population that runs the gamut in terms of income levels, in terms of poverty levels, and when you look at the housing, it's a totally different source than towns. So, and not including the fact they deal with the capital, they deal with the crowds that are generated by being a capital city. So there's a lot of different issues that face the urban policing versus the suburban.
So you're saying, in layman's terms, that maybe the income level, meaning it's a poorer city?
Well, your income per capita is much lower between the 2 areas. When you look at the Bethlehem, Officer Guilderland, we have the same types of crime as the city of Albany. We just have less. So we'll still have the occasional murder where they may have 10 per year, we may have 1, or we average about 0.5 per year. When you look at robbery, we'll have 30 or 40, they may have a couple hundred. So that's the type of thing you see. It's the same type of crime.
So how do you do it? How are you so much safer than the city of Albany?
It's not a question of what we do. It's the makeup of the people. We have, like I said, a higher socioeconomic status of people. We run the gamut in housing, though. We have everything from Section 8 housing all the way up to the mansions throughout the town. But it's a different animal in terms of how we go about policing it, and also the type of people that we have in the town.
Now, can Albany learn something from you, or do you learn from Albany, or how does this?
We learn from each other.
You learn from each
We're
other.
very close. Okay. We're very close. And one thing the Capital District is very fortunate to have is police departments that get along. Throughout the state, there are areas where the sheriff won't talk to the chief, or won't talk to the major in the state police. Well, we actually truly do get along. The state police is in our town. The state police has a very big presence in the city of Albany, too.
Well, Governor Cuomo's really hot on consolidation. Any chance that you can see any law enforcement consolidation, whether it's between, villages, towns, or whatever? I mean,
Mark, he talks a lot about consolidation. If you read a lot of the different writings that are out there, consolidation costs money. Very often you don't save a whole lot of money with consolidation, and a lot of times at the end of the day, the people who got consolidated aren't real happy with the finished product. Across the state, there's been a few consolidations with police departments between the town, where the town has done away with the police department and merged with the sheriffs or something. And in some cases it works, but in a lot of cases that sheriff's department does not have the manpower. The only way consolidation works is if they don't hire all those people again, and that you reduce the amount of police officers in the county,
Then they're less safe.
and you end up with less police officers in the village or town. And we have 2 villages in our town, one with a police department, one without. The one with the police department, they want nothing to do with the consolidation. They're very happy with their village police department and the services they provide.
Is it territorial identification? What is the
Well,
reason?
I think it's because it's their police department, and they get tremendous patrols. The village of Manans does a tremendous job with their police department. It's a small village. They can almost guarantee that their cars will be on your street once or twice a day. And in a town, it's 60 square miles with 320 miles of roads. There's no way that I can guarantee that a police car is going to be on every street during every course of the day. So the smaller villages and towns, they like having their own police department.
Well, that's the governor was saying. It's more territorial. Is that we want?
It's not even territorial. It's a sense of feeling of safety, of security. When you have a police department with 20 people, that's 20 people that are patrolling your town, investigating your crimes. When you turn that realm over to the sheriff's department, I'm not saying that the sheriff's department won't do a good job, but very often they're going to have their cars in the area where it's more important to them. That may not be your town.
Right.
So you may not have that police patrol that you've grown to expect.
Exactly. And then crime may rise because...
You can have a change in crime levels. You may not get the same reaction from that law enforcement agency. Where we take calls from anybody who calls, they want a car, we'll send a car. Not all agencies do that. That's a luxury, and you may have it where the bigger agency may not be able to do that.
What's your average response time?
Probably in the 5 to 7 minute range.
Yeah, that's what I experienced.
I
had a fender bender recently.
With an emergency basis, probably 5 to 7 minutes. Sometimes the car's right outside your door. It's 30 seconds. Other times, our town is a big town, and if by chance we're short on the western end of the town, a lot of people forget that we go to exit 25 of the thruway.
Right.
So if a call comes in from Curry Road Extension, it's going to take a few minutes to get there.
Well, that really leads into another issue, which maybe is not our suburban area or the metro area, but it's the SAFE Act and
How did I know we might get there?
Yeah, well, because I know the counter argument, obviously it's passed, but still people can argue, it's a free country, that they don't like it, and the reason is because people, and if I could say the boondocks or the rural areas, is a nice way to say it, that it would take 20 minutes for a police car. I guess it's not a colony or, I say, a suburban question, because you say it takes 5 minutes, but if you're in the hoop, it's...
And that's a big argument by my counterparts in the central part of the state and the northern part of the state. Even if they have a sheriff's department and the state police, it could take 20, 30, 40 minutes for someone to get to their house. And a major argument against the SAFE Act was the fact that they felt it was inhibiting the citizens' rights under the amendments to bear arms to protect their houses. The SAFE Act doesn't take away your right to bear arms. It takes away your right to bear certain arms. But other than that, it still didn't restrict the class of people from bearing them.
So are you in favor of the SAFE Act personally?
I would keep my personal opinion
No,
away
I'd
from
like
it.
to.
I think from the state association standpoint, we've generally supported it. There are some things that came out of the SAFE Act which I think will eventually help make New York safer. The mental health component, where it's requiring the mental health professionals to report people who may be a danger to themselves. They never did that before. Under HIPAA, they were prevented from doing that. That helps. As far as for anybody to say that it will immediately save lives, that's a misnomer.
And the magazines being 7 bullets instead of 10.
Well, remember, we've got the federal decision out towards Buffalo that overturned that. And there's some talk coming out of the governor's office, I believe, that says that they're going to probably remove that from the restrictions, which will make a big difference, because that was the one that was widely criticized. The manufacturers don't make 7-round magazines. Right. Nobody makes something to alter a 10-round magazine to make it 7. And to think that somebody's only going to put 7 in a 10-round magazine, it's kind of ludicrous.
Yeah.
Okay, and everybody pretty much sees that. So, there are things that I look at it in terms of, how it affects me personally. It doesn't, as far as renewing permits. We renew our driver's license every so many years. Yeah. We pay our taxes every year. To have to renew your pistol permit every 5 years, I don't think is that much of a draw, especially if they follow through and say that you'll be able to do it online and at no cost. And I think that was one of the biggest criticisms.
So you have to keep your personal opinions to yourself?
No, I
because-
think I pretty much just expressed my personal.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
wanted
as
to
well
make
as the-
sure that it wasn't.
And our association, how can you stand, and I know the Sheriff's Association takes a different look on it, but we're not elected, so I don't have to cater to the clientele, so to
yeah.
speak, the elected people. But overall, do we believe that it should be felony to possess a gun illegally? Yes, we do. That was one of the biggest provisions of it, that they changed. Do we believe that guns shouldn't be on school grounds? Yeah, we believe that guns shouldn't be on school grounds. So when you look at things, I personally
That was
believe in
not
that.
a law beforehand?
It was
You would think it would be.
Yeah, I know, that's
it
what I
was, but
thinking.
this tightened it up.
Oh, okay.
This did some things to tighten things up.
Okay.
So, a lot of it had to do with the assault weapons, and, with that, it's the people that shoot the guns. There are 300 million guns in America, okay?
Guns don't kill, people kill.
Exactly. Almost one per every man, woman, and child in the country. So, as far as the SAFE Act, going in a big way to change that bent, we got to change people's attitudes and how they treat guns.
That's one thing leads to another in our conversation, and it's good that, you're talking about schools and guns, and, I always tell them I'm 29 years old, but in any case, when we're young, never heard of someone going to a school and shooting them. Now, thank God, Mark, he knows everything about New York State, it really hasn't happened, thank God, in our area, but, listen, who's to say tomorrow,
But
you
it did
never
happen
know.
at University at Albany
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
You're right.
in
You're right
'93.
about it.
That was actually one of the first ones nationwide,
Really.
if you look at it.
So is there any way to prepare for that? I mean, you're talking about, like you say, real, obviously screwballs, they're off the wall, and it's, it's incredible
The only way to prepare,
craziness.
you prepare for two things. You prepare to prevent it, you prepare to respond to it, and you prepare for the recovery afterward.
Yeah.
And we're actually looking at the recovery. We know that if we get a call for an active shooter in a school, my people know what to do. They will respond, and they will take that active shooter out. They will go find that shooter, and they will reduce that situation, okay? In listening to the chiefs from Newtown and Aurora, Colorado recently at the annual international conference, what they had the bigger problem with, the whole incident took 5 minutes.
Right.
What they had the bigger problem was the months afterward, restoring normalcy back to the school or back to the theater.
psychological
The
impact.
psychological recovery of even the people within their own departments.
Really?
It was
Interesting.
nobody thinks about the recovery end of it. And that's all police agencies ever since Columbine have changed the way they respond to active shooters. Unfortunately, that still doesn't help us prevent them. That only helps us respond to them. And that's what they were trying to do with the SAFE Act, was some of it with the mental health component,
Right.
was to try to do with the prevention, because almost every one of these mass shooters has had a record of some form of treatable mental illness.
The other part is the communications aspect. I mean, how is the Colonie Police Department, changed their communications or to beef it up to make it, you don't use those walkie-talkie radios anymore. You're much more sophisticated.
We're still working on walkie-talkie radios.
Okay.
Well, I tell you what we're doing on a countywide basis is we actually, when we purchased our radio system about 8 years ago now, we purchased one big enough to power up just about the whole state of New York. Didn't cost much more for the extra bandwidth and the extra channels. We are now partnering with the county, with the city of Albany, to get everybody in the county so that they'll have the capability to talk on that radio system.
Because when 9/11 happened, the police and the EMS and all the fire department, they couldn't communicate with each other.
And that's, Mark, that's still happening.
Well, has Colonie?
Well, that's what we're working on now.
You're working on it.
Is pulling it together to where my cars will be able to talk with the sheriff's car, to talk to a city of Albany car, and to make it all happen. You got to
Can you
realize.
talk to the volunteer
We always
firefighters,
could.
and
Well,
EMS and all that?
Our communications center can.
Right, okay.
Under this new way, we'll probably be able to talk directly to the
Great.
truck. And that was one of the problems. I think it was in a mall in New Jersey about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Over 500 police officers responded. They couldn't talk to each other. And that kind of control at a scene is very important.
And when do you think the improvements will be made that, in the Colonie Police Department
That'll
You said
be
you're working on it, but do you think it's a 2-year plan? Or?
It's before 2 years. They're now entering in agreements now with the county attorneys, city attorneys, town attorneys, because we have the equipment. The county's investing a tremendous amount of money to purchase rights to our equipment and to put the thing together. So we've actually had product delivered to our building in anticipation of it. So it's a question of just putting it together.
Great.
That'll never solve the problem.
No, make it easier though
for
you. It'll make it easier for you to deal with it.
It makes it easier, but in Newtown, just to give you an example of the response, over the month after the shooting at the school, over 65 agencies provided 1,500 police officers to manage the police response in Newtown, Connecticut.
Within a few minutes, you mean? Like
No, within that month, to secure the town, to handle the police calls, because Newtown only had 40 police officers, and they were tied up very much with the immediate demands. So will we ever have a statewide system? They tried that in the state. It was going to be a $2 billion project. It didn't work. The technology didn't work. It may work today better than it did when they tried to do it 7 years ago. They were basically talking about cloud technology then. It wasn't out there.
Right.
Today it might work, but the bottom line is there is no statewide system. So you'll never totally stop what you're referring to.
Okay.
What we're hoping to do in Albany County, though, because most of the agencies that would be responding would be from Albany County, to be able to tie that together so that we could all talk to each other.
Great. Now, let me ask you, switching topics, about use of marijuana, legalization of marijuana. I mean, some people say it's a gateway drug. Some people say this is something that should be legalized. And then, in Albany, they have a big heroin problem. Maybe it's around the whole county, big problem with heroin. What do you see as your position on the drug issue?
As with most of your questions so far, they're multifaceted.
Yes.
Heroin is huge throughout the Capital District. It's huge throughout the state of New York.
Heroin.
Our EMS it's the whole opiate/heroin problem, because it's all tied hand in hand. Our EMS department has responded to over 200 overdoses in 2013 alone.
Really?
That's a huge number.
Yes.
And that number is just repeated throughout the whole Capital District. It's very unfortunate. The majority of young people you see on the local section on page 4, 5, and 6, which is the obituary section, most of them are through opiate overdoses or heroin overdoses. And it's a horrible shame. We've had a couple of deaths within the town. So obviously, we know that's a serious, serious problem. Some of it, they say, has actually been caused by the tightening of the prescription drug use and the prescription drug procedures by doctors, so that it's a OxyContin or hydrocodone addict can't get them anymore, or the pills are so expensive it's cheaper by the heroin. Heroin is going for $10, $12 a bag.
Yeah.
A pill's going for $20 a piece.
It's not even.
You're having people make the switch.
Heroin's an affordable drug, so to speak. It used to be in the 70s for the rich people.
Correct.
Only now it's for the masses.
It's for the masses, and it's tremendously addictive, and we know from the people we see involved in it, it's just a horrendous thing.
Right, so marijuana legalization.
But,
We don't
before
believe
you
we-
say that, how would you stop?
Okay.
I mean, what about a source? Maybe the guy in the street or the pusher in the street is coming from somewhere. It doesn't come from, like, say, Cloud 9. I'm just saying is there any way? Maybe it's beyond the Colonie force.
Well,
maybe it's an FBI. Who knows? I don't know.
There's
where it's
not a
coming
law
from
enforcement
overseas.
agency that's not working on the heroin problem.
Right.
Yeah, but
But the majority of it comes out of New York City. The problem is the demand. If you do not reduce the demand, the president of Mexico, in a major speech before his Congress, I don't know what it's called,
Right.
blamed America for their murder problem in the country of Mexico. In one city, they're averaging 3,000 murders a year.
Yeah.
In the opposite city across the border, they average 300. The reason being is that the marijuana trade is so lucrative. And where's it all going? It's going to the United States. The United States uses 75% of all illicit drugs in the world.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And that's heroin, cocaine,
heard that.
marijuana. And, so a lot of people say to America, don't tell us about our supply. We wouldn't have the supply if you would reduce your demand. So you have to get to these people, you have to get programming in. And, most police chiefs won't talk to you about programming. They'd rather talk about incarceration. But incarceration doesn't work.
Well, right.
If you don't solve it through programming, you're not going to solve it.
So getting back to programming, because I still want to get your position on the marijuana.
We're against
issue.
it.
You're
I'm against
marijuana.
it personally. I've spent 40 years trying to eradicate our roadways of people that are intoxicated, inebriated, who are under the influence, who've killed
Right.
people, okay? To think now that we're going to just open up the doors, like Colorado, like the state of Washington, and everybody's just going to be able to get high and jump in a car, it's just ludicrous at this point.
Okay.
The medical marijuana, even the Chiefs Association feels, and you have to understand, the AMA, the American Psychiatric Association, they just came out in November with new position papers steadfastly against the legalization or the medical use of marijuana.
Medical,
That's
because
interesting.
medical use of marijuana is like morphine, the medical use of morphine for the end of life, where it's administered in a hospital under a controlled situation. Medical marijuana would be the same way in a hospital under controlled situation.
The state chiefs, reasonable people know if under the right situations and for people who are to that point in their lives that is the only thing that can do it, we would not be against it.
Right.
But unfortunately, if you look around the country, in California for medical marijuana, you go into a place like the 7-Eleven Medical Center in our town, you tell them you have a headache, and there's a medical marijuana dispenser right outside that door. And next thing you know, they've got over 1 million or 2 million people now who need medical marijuana. So there's got to be some halfway in between. The majority of the mainstream medical profession still believes that there is the appropriate drugs that are out there to treat it, and that you don't
pain
need
relief drugs. What do
and
they
you
need
don't
this
need to
for?
give marijuana for doing it.
It's interesting though, but I totally agree with you. But I mean, I have in my temple, in the synagogue, these are not druggies. These are upper middle class. Oh, we should legalize. I says, what are you talking about? They says, well, we'd have, like you say, so you know how much money the government would make? It's $1 billion industry. There'd be, so, see, I have 10 jobs. One of them is a Jewish chaplain visiting the prisons. So I'm sure, I know you do. I mean, you see when someone dying of heroin, it's a shame, But people are incarcerated for drugs, and and it's a shame, and I try to, like you say, program and try to get them out of it. But
To be
a normal,
incarcerating
good
all the
person-
users is not the answer. It's not solving the problem. It hasn't solved the problem. If you look at the city of Albany, my guess is, I don't know the exact number, a good portion of the murders that you've seen in Albany and Schenectady and Troy, they've not been over heroin distribution. They've been over marijuana distribution.
Really? That's an
There is a
interesting.
huge amount of money in marijuana distribution, and that's not going to go away. People think the black market's going to disappear because you all of a sudden have legalized marijuana, and that's just has not been the case.
So let me ask you this, and may seem like a stretch because I never thought of the connection until recently. Universal pre-K, talking about crime in pre-K, talking about not using marijuana as early as that. I mean, I know some police officers feel that's the way to go, and they were pleading with the education committee to bring in that program into the pre-K program, and they do universal pre-K. Can you expand on that? Do you think there's a connection?
I think our association has stood behind many programs that believe in universal pre-K. Because very simply, if you talk to school superintendents, they will tell you, if a child is having a problem by the 3rd grade, they are almost destined to have a problem throughout. And a lot of these young people, a lot of these kids that are coming, especially in the urban area, okay? Don't get me wrong, my son has pre-K kids. They go to a pre-K program. He pays for it.
Okay.
He can afford to pay for it. There's a lot of people throughout my town, surrounding cities, that just can't afford to pay $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 to send their kids to a pre-K program. Right. And those kids are behind when they hit kindergarten, especially with the new requirements in the schools. I mean, if they haven't had pre-K, they're instantly behind the day they start school. And it's been shown over and over, especially in the inner city, especially in poverty-driven areas. If you don't get those kids before kindergarten, you may lose them at 3rd grade.
Wow.
And when you look at the pregnancy rates and the drug rates and the crime rates and the rates of just people not being successful, not thriving in our society, okay? It's many times those people that have problems reading and writing by the time they by the time they drop out.
So that's why
of 10th grade.
It's so important.
And that's why, and don't get me wrong, this was a stretch for police officers to start talking about pre-K
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
90s?
I was saying, Mark started saying, wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
There's a group called Fight Crime Investing Kids, and they're not-for-profit. That's what they do. They lobby Congress, they lobby
Right.
New York for universal pre-K, also for home visiting. You know, there's a lot of young single mothers, single fathers that don't know how to raise children from birth to, say, age 4.
Okay, so
And there's advocates for that.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I want to talk about your youth court in the town because I didn't know this until I went on your website that Laura Bush came to Colonie
She did.
to tout the youth court. I mean, and the first lady of the United States. She was first lady at the time.
Yeah, she was.
mean, wow. I didn't
I've got a
remember
great
that happening.
I've got a great picture in my office.
Yeah.
You missed that
I
story
missed
over
that.
here, Mark.
I didn't
McKenna
even, was it
reported.
known? Did you promote it, or was it a quiet thing where she came in and?
No, actually, it was not well publicized when she came. She wanted it that way.
Okay.
She came. She watched one of our youth court proceedings. She was very impressed with it. It was the youth was one of her main priorities during the 8 years of her husband's term. Our youth court has been recognized by the UN. Our youth court went to the UN and actually put on a demonstration for members of the UN Council. We've been internationally recognized. We're nationally recognized as a model for youth courts to follow. You know, our youth court began with a not-for-profit back in '92. It did well while I was getting state grants, but as with all projects, state grants disappear. They handled on their own through donations. They dried up. The town and the police department finally absorbed them in my budget, you know, about 7 years ago. And we're just extremely proud of it. I mean, it's a civics lesson. We put 1,500 kids through it that had committed small crimes. They completed their community service. We've gotten 50,000 hours of community service through the youth court, all donated to town and county interest, okay? Those people also come back and act as jurors on the youth court. So it's a civics lesson.
So they stay involved.
So they stay involved. And some of them stay involved to the point where they become police officers, they become lawyers, they
Wow.
become teachers. And every year, about 90 kids are involved with it, acting as the jurist, the judge, the defense attorney, the plaintiff, the prosecutor, and jury foreman. It's a civics lesson.
I
And it's
just
something
think
that's very
just
powerful.
because it's the Jewish view, I just want to put in a Jewish idea. It really is, it's part of, instead of like you say, incarcerating or whipping kids, I mean, in the olden days, you know, it was just to train them to be better. The main thing is to mold people, like you say, program, educate them, and become part of society, not just be vindictive and, oh, we're going to put you away, you did something wrong, we'll show you, you know. So it's a very Jewish attitude that is becoming progressive in that sense.
And yeah, and we take them, and even the community service is not meant to be punitive. Okay, we don't make them wash 100 cars in a day. They're working at the food bank. They're working at the Pride House for civic events for there. If their crime was larceny, they're going to a class on larceny and why not to steal. If their crime was anger management, they're referred to anger management programs. You know, it's meant to be for the first timer so that it teaches them a lesson and they don't come back. And we have almost a zero recidivism rate.
Wow, I was going to ask you.
And the nicest thing about this program, we have a 98% completion rate. In other words, you went through the program, you did your community service, and you went back home. The nicest thing about the program is it's not just open to Colonie kids. So if an Albany kid or a Schenectady kid gets arrested out there, we offer it to their parents too. You'd be amazed how many of them take us up on it, and they'll take cabs to the police station on Saturday mornings for community service. They'll sit and wait for their children to come back. They'll take the cab back home because they want what's right for their kid too.
All right, now let me ask you this one last question as we have to wrap up. Is, you know, in Bethlehem and Guilderland, there's problems with pedestrian safety. Also in Troy, I guess, there's problems with pedestrian safety. Is there a problem with sidewalks not being built in Colonie? Do you have problems with people crossing the street illegally?
Our problem in the town, you know, we've had probably 100 pedestrian accidents in the last 10 years or so. It's probably more than that. Probably 98% of them were people over the age of 30. You know, we teach our children to look both ways. Yeah. We have a problem with people that, even though a crosswalk is 100 yards away, they're in a dark area of the street and they just step out in front of cars.
I don't know if you remember growing up, across at the green, not in between.
Right. Well, it's very simple. You know, in New York City, my daughter lives in New York City. You know, they move millions of people on the sidewalks. And I've never seen a person get hit down there. They know when to cross. I know they do get hit.
Yeah, they do.
But they know when to cross. They know to go with the lights. They know to do it at a crosswalk. You know, and up here, we have a tendency to not think about that. The other problem up here is our streets really weren't designed for pedestrian travel.
Right, that's what I was.
You know, with even if we have sidewalks, it's never been pushed in, educated into people. They learn as children, they forget as adults. And, you know, the other problem we've had is that some people imbibe in either alcohol or drugs.
But do people not want sidewalks because it makes it feel too urban? And
Oh, no,
I've heard that argument in Bethlehem.
There are some cases where neighborhoods would prefer not to have sidewalks, and I can understand it. We don't have the accidents in the neighborhoods. Our accidents involving pedestrians have been on streets with sidewalks.
So like Central Avenue?
That's Central Avenue. That's a
Wolf Road?
major one. Very few on Wolf Road,
Okay.
majority on Central, some on Route 9,
Any-
Route 2,
are
Route
you
7.
doing anything to mitigate this?
We've done education programs. We've done all the hotels and all the public establishments along Central Avenue. We've enlisted aid of Niagara Mohawk with the state DOT to get the intersections lit up better, to make sure the crosswalks are very accentuated so that people can see it. We've actually done a lot because we too have been depressed by the amount of adults that have gotten hit by cars.
Okay, well, give me a blessing.
You know, I think you're doing good work, Chief, and keep the good work up. And that's what we like seeing the police officers. You're not there with your six-shooter, you know, ready to shoot everybody. But I just say very progressive and educating program and trying to solve crime, not just go shooting and incarcerating everybody. So keep up the good work. You've come a long way in life, and keep on going and doing good work for the people
Thank
of
you very
Colonie.
much.
Thanks
Thank you very
for
much.
thanks for coming in. Taking
It's a
the time.
wonderful thing. Thank you.